start.
Yes, sir.
Madhuri, madam, please start.
Yes.
Please start the session.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. Good morning and welcome to the speakers of the day, Dr. Anuradha Sony and Dr. Geeta Chadha, and all the participants on this third day of the National Virtual Conference on Multidimensional Perspective to Navigate COVID-19, organized by Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College, Ghatkopar, Mumbai. To begin with, I invite the principal of the college, Dr. Asha Menon, to give a formal welcome address. Dr. Asha Menon.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the day 3 of the National Virtual Conference titled Multidimensional Perspectives of Navigating with COVID-19, organized by S.P. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Anuradha Sony, Madam, Head of the Department, Psychology, SNDT Women's University. We are all aware that she's a very prolific speaker and speaks from our heart. The compassion she has for her subject is tremendous. It is very noticeable when she speaks. Today, she's going to speak on the psychological aspect of navigating through COVID-19. The second speaker of the day is Dr. Geeta Chadha. Welcome, madam, who has enormous knowledge in her subject, sociology, and she's someone who wears many hats. Welcome, ma'am. I would also like to welcome Dr. Kumidavali, Director, SPRJ Trust, the force behind us to the final day of the conference. I also would like to welcome all the principals participating today and the participants from various colleges who have made it good by coming here in large numbers. Your words of encouragement has kept us going. I wish to welcome all of you once again. Thank you. Over to Mrs. Madhuri Vaidya.
Thank you, Dr. Asha. First of all the participants, our sincere apologies for delaying and starting the conference half an hour late, but we are not going to compromise at time, and therefore please bear with us till 1:30. Since the conference is hosted by the Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College in association with MUKTA, that is Mumbai University and College Teachers Association, I request the General Secretary of MUKTA, Mr. Subhash Athavale, to speak a few words about MUKTA and orient the audience. Over to Subhash Athavale.
Thank you very much, Madhuri, madam. Even from my side, it is the apology to all the participants and the people from the newsroom and honorable resource persons for the day. Due to some technical error, we got delayed. But nevertheless, now everything is working properly. MUKTA, that is Mumbai University and College Teachers Association, is formed in 2008 under the leadership of Dr. Suvarna Rawal, who is also there in the newsroom along with us. She is also governor's nominee on SNDT University, Mumbai. It is the president, Dr. Shekhar Chandratre, and the General Secretary, Dr. Namdev Mange, who had initiated the association in the beginning, and now it has become a good, well-developed organization under the leadership of Dr. Vaibhav Naravde as president and myself as General Secretary. We have two very important cells in MUKTA. One is teacher grievance cell and another is teacher education cell. Recently, we have also formulated one cell, which is a publication cell, who is going to look after all the publications which are very relevant from the teacher's point of view. We have, from 4th of April, we have started this webinar series under the name Dr. Dattopant Thegde's, of whom we are celebrating a birth centenary year. Under this series, we have completed up till now 13 webinars on different general topics, which were very useful from teachers' point of view. And we have then started assisting the colleges, providing technical assistance to the colleges and the universities under this lecture series program. We have around 40 webinars conducted, 13 from MUKTA and another from the colleges and the universities, and a very good, very well response has been received from universities and colleges and the participants. I'm very happy to announce that 107 universities from all over India and abroad, their representatives are joining to these webinars. Also, I'm very happy to inform here that the initiative taken by MUKTA has been appreciated all over the teachers' fraternity. In each and every program which has been conducted, not less than 3,000 plus participants are taking benefit of this lecture series. We assure that we also provide such kind of technical assistance to the colleges and the universities whosoever is in need of it. I thank you to the organizer, especially Asha Madam and the PN Doshi College and the management for giving us this opportunity to host and assist technically to the college so that the webinar can be live on YouTube channel right at this point of time. Thank you very much. Over to Madhuri Madam.
Thank you, Athavle sir. And indeed, it is our pleasure too to associate with MUKTA and in collaboration to host this conference on such a larger scale. Thank you so much. Before we go further, I would like to make two announcements. Number one, regarding the questions. Dear participants, you can post the questions on Telegram group, and at the end of both the sessions today, we will address your questions in the question answer forum. Second announcement is about feedback. As last 2 days we have been doing, after the end of the program, after the end of today's sessions, we all need to fill up the feedback form and help us to improvise further for arranging further such academic sessions. With these two announcements, let's go further for today's sessions. In this process of navigation, we started with different dimensions, such as medical historical perspective, which was taken by Dr. Mridula Ramanna, followed by Dr. Judy, who shared educational perspective with us. Day 2, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, who gave us an economic perspective navigating this COVID-19, gave us a very holistic picture about number of challenges, economic issues that are arising out of this COVID-19. But at the end, she did mention about that if the challenges are not addressed adequately, there is a possibility of certain mental issues that are likely to be faced by all the people across the sections of the society. In the next session, Dr. Jaisani, who focused more on the governance part rather than public health and safety issues, also tried to touch upon another psychological concept, and that is, he said that we need to be very careful as far as stigmatization is concerned. Before we label a person that he is so-and-so with COVID positive, it has to be ensured again, because it is definitely going to have some mental scar on his mind as well as the family. I think these issues definitely indicate the importance of mental health in this entire scenario of pandemic. My old friends, I'm sure that all of you will agree to me on one point, and that is that during last 2 months, we have been playing, each and every one of us, we are playing multiple roles. Rather, I would say that this pandemic has made all of us multitaskers. Rather, when the lockdown was implemented, we all were struggling to play so many roles with which we were not used to. But at the same time, we were enjoying as well. We were getting irritated, but we were excited too. Couple of times we used to find shortcuts in playing number of other roles. Since this is a very formal platform, I am not going to name those roles, but I'm sure each and every one of us are fully aware of it. Out of so many, 2 roles which I need to mention over here. that we all are playing again as academicians in particular. One is the teacher and the other is parent. Both the roles are so close, near and dear to our heart, that ignoring or sidelining any one of the roles would be really unfair. But which means that yes, we need to balance between these two roles. Now, while balancing, what is the flow of thoughts in our mind? What are the emotions, feelings that we all experience? And finally, in which role we land up maximum time of the day, rather number of hours of the day, which definitely brings a lot of psychological and emotional turmoil in all our minds and personal lives. To navigate us, to guide us on such psychosocial issues, today we are going to talk about psychosocial and sociological perspectives to navigate pandemic COVID-19. In the first session, we have a multitask master who has been multitasking pre-COVID, during COVID, and I'm sure she would continue even post-COVID as well. She is a psychologist, psychotherapist, researcher, and more important, teacher, parent, and also a grandparent.
Hello.
She is none other than Dr. Anuradha Sony.
Consent letter पाठवायचं होतं 2 days सॅलरीचं.
To formally introduce Dr. Anuradha Sony, a recipient of number of awards and scholars right from her school age till PhD. She has been a guide of 20 research scholars. So far, 14 are done with PhD under her guidance and 5 are in the process. Dr. Anuradha Sony has been an author of 5 books. She has written 5 books in Marathi on children's mental health. She has been an author of chapters in different books relevant to clinical disorders. She has been writing the research papers in national and international journals. And recently, she has co-authored a book with Sage Publication on abnormal psychology, wherein she has given Indian perspective to different mental disorders. Dr. Anuradha Sony is instrumental in developing a project, pre-litigation counseling with Mumbai High Court, which started last year and is branched now in Mumbai, in Pune, Nagpur, and Aurangabad. A day before yesterday, Judy was talking about gamification to be brought and highly used in the field of education. Dr. Anuradha Sony has developed first gamified recruitment and talent management tool called Nautex. Also, she has developed Prakash Doot, an audio-visual module with FAQs. A very active practitioner in the field of mental health, Dr. Sony has worked as a consultant in different national and state level bodies, right from Nimhans, Yashoda, and various hospitals like Jaslok Hospital in Mumbai. She had headed the Department of Applied Psychology in Mumbai University for more than 2 decades. And currently, Dr. Sony is working as professor and head of the Department of Applied Psychology at SNDT Women's University. And also she is the Associate Dean of Humanities in the university. One of the trustees and consultants in IPH in Thane. A very versatile person in the field of clinical psychology. Dr. Sony is the right person to talk about teachers negotiating parenthood, psychosocial perspective to COVID-19. Over to you, Dr. Anuradha Sony.
Thank you very much, friends. I want to formally thank all the people who so well organized, so smoothly organized this entire 3-day feast that was brought to all of you. So first of all, of course, Dr. Kumudavali, because she was one of the first people I came into contact with when I came to SNDT. Wonderful person. Thank you, ma'am, for everything you've done. And of course, my colleagues, Dr. Asha Menon and Madhuri, my friend for many, many years, even before I came to SNDT, and Subhash ji for organizing this. We have started a little late, I'm afraid, but Geeta is an old friend again from MU. And I don't want her to have to sort of get people to wait and drop off early because the time is passing. So I will try to a little bit abbreviate my session, and I'll try to end well before 12:30, given that now it's about quarter to 12. And then I would only request that, of course, I will be waiting back to listen to Geeta for sure, but I would like to take questions for my session right away after my session is done, because the perspective will change, and there will be a lot of other questions, I'm sure, which will be directed later to Geeta. So let's divide up the key questions right after each session, if that is all right. All the people, all my friends, my students, colleagues who are listening on YouTube, again, welcome. And I'm very happy that all of you are there to listen to this very important dialogue regarding all the different roles that we are playing. Before I start, I want to say, and I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can see the slides. But I do want to say that I have been enormously fortunate in my career as a psychologist. Always, ever since I was a very young teacher and I just started, in fact, I don't think I've hardly taught college at all, maybe a year or two, mainly postgraduate. But I have always wanted to have this researcher role, a practitioner role. So traditionally, what is sort of expected as a tripartite role of psychologists. I've always wanted that, and it was known many, many years before as a Boulder model, where in Boulder, Colorado, this concept came up that good psychologists should be researchers, teachers, and practitioners. And I've always been very, very fortunate that I was able to weave all these three perspectives together. And so a point comes sometimes when you don't really want to. It's not like you can't. You are professionally trained to keep your clinical perspective, your patient perspective separate, your student perspective separate, and your personal life separate. So it comes with the territory. You have to do it as part of your job, otherwise you'll get burnt out. If you keep carrying your burdens from patient work into teaching work, burdens from teaching work into personal life. But somewhere I have always had the need to borrow from each other, the perspectives from each other, so that I can enrich each role. And I've always found that very useful. So I found it good to be able to pull in patient experiences, clinical experiences into my teaching, to sometimes even pull in, my other life experiences of teaching and patient work into personal life, because it gives you a sense of distance, a sense of objectivity, to be able to see life problems and to be able to negotiate life problems with a certain amount of patience and mindfulness. Of course, I've been very blessed with friends from the same field who have been stalwarts, who have been pillars of support. So being somewhere close to the end of my teaching career, I have no regrets about having to mix all these three perspectives. So friends, what I want to do today in the half an hour, 45 minutes, which I have, is I would like to bring in these three roles and also think of how best we as teachers can bring in our understanding as parents. We as parents can bring in our understanding as teachers and enrich our own roles along the way. I will also add in a little bit of the research which we are currently doing. A lot of my research, which I do typically, is action research. There's a lot of community work which comes into it, because that is my key interest. And so I was very amused when everyone was apologizing about the delay, half an hour delay, because of technical glitches and YouTube glitches, because we in community work are always used to delays. So I was thinking back while we were waiting for the program to start about so many programs. I remember one where I had gone to give a talk and they had tried to arrange a mic. Now that was wonderful, because in a community setting, it's not easy to arrange a microphone. But I don't have the loudest of voices. So they knew that I won't be heard in a large group of 200, 300 people. And so they arranged the mic, but it was a very shaky mic, so it would keep moving every time I spoke. And then this main man, like he was some kind of a local leader, and he walked up and he pulled out his handkerchief and he tied the mic very firmly to the stand. And he said, "Tai, आता तुम्ही काही काळजी करू नका, आता काही होणार नाही, now the mic is going to work well." So you see, I think this is the fun. This is where the opportunity lies in the crisis. This is where you learn to negotiate all the difficulties which come, like they have come in the pandemic, and come out wiser, stronger, smarter. So you will have figured by now that a lot of the perspective I'm going to bring today is more of a positive perspective. I'm not going to dwell too much on diagnostics and stigma. And although I agree that what Amar brought up yesterday was very important, and yes, people are definitely, there's a whole fear psychosis around COVID, which shouldn't be there at all. It's an illness like any other illness, and it has to be treated, and people have to get better. That's the simple fact. So let's move straight to my presentation. And so this warning note in the beginning was like a sort of spoiler alert, trying to tell you that there will be times when you'll be quite confused. What is she talking about? Is she talking about me as a teacher or me as a parent? But I have a feeling you will figure it out by the end, as most things become clear by the end. So here we are with the slides. So what I've titled my session, friends, is Teachers Negotiating Parenthood. We are essentially teachers. Our role in the community is that of a teacher. We are definitely working from home, all of us, even if we are locked down. So the fact that we are playing the role as a teacher has not gone anywhere. But we also cannot leave aside the fact that we are parents. And slowly, as I go through the session, you will start noticing how close the two roles are, and how clearly we have to tell ourselves which role are we in right now. Because you see, a lot of the parameters that are required to be a good teacher or a good parent are quite similar. And I'm going to bring in some fairly interesting research to show you this. So I'm going to ask you a few questions to start off the session. Obviously, it's not at this point interactive. So you can answer the questions for yourself, and then you will find the answers in yourself. You won't need to ask me those questions later. So first question I want to ask you is, what is this a checklist of? Okay, it's a checklist of duties. It's a checklist of, just read it. It says we have to provide a safe environment. We have to provide for basic needs. We have to provide for self-esteem needs. We have to teach morals and values. We have to develop mutual respect. We have to provide discipline, which is effective and appropriate. We have to involve ourselves in their education, and we have to get to know them. When we are with our parent hat on, like Asha Menon told us in the beginning, Geeta and I are pretty much hat shifters. We all wear multiple. It's a patient who's a parent sitting in front of me. I would agree with them that yes, you have to do all of these things. Just a small interruption. If at any point you see the signal going, because I have a very poor signal in Thane, I'm just trying to back up with another geo backup. But if it doesn't work, just give me a call so that I will know there is some problem with signal. This is not the most well-equipped area in terms of signal availability. So I'm just putting my backup up, but in case you have any problem hearing me, please just quickly give me a call on my phone. Yeah, sorry for that interruption. So the answer that will come from the parent is, yes, I need to do all this with my child. If it's a smaller child, all the more the safety aspects, the basic need aspects. If it's a little older child, then yes, the morals, values, the self-esteem, but yes, we get to know them. We have to know them. But if I'm also looking at an older child's parent, they will say, well, okay, the safety bit does have a big role now, but not for physical safety. Now I'm looking more for their internet safety. I'm looking more for their sexual safety. I'm looking for the kind of decisions they are taking in life, and are they going to remain safe? See? So the answer changes, although the checklist pretty much remains the same. And then if we're putting on our teacher hat, of course we have to do all these things. So when the university tells us that we are going to start going back maybe in the middle of June, if we can now in the current circumstances, the first thing that's coming to our mind is, are we sanitizing the environments in which the children will sit, the students? Are we ensuring that they are well spaced out in terms of distancing? Do they have a safe way to travel to the study place, or should we just continue with online learning? So you see, a lot of the questions that we now answer are getting answered from a teacher perspective. So what I'm trying to bring to your attention is that there's not that much of a difference in the tick boxes that we have to tick whether you're a teacher or whether you're a parent. Let's look at the next slide. Now, this is well-known research. Everybody who has read Diana Baumrind, and years ago, it's decades-old research, tells you that there are 4 kinds of parents. There are authoritarian parents, authoritative parents, permissive parents, and uninvolved parents. What are they like? The healthiest style is supposed to be the authoritative style, where you set limits, where you set discipline, and you are still very warm, you are very child-centered, you're nurturing, and you're responsive. You're constantly in dialogue with your child, but the child knows very well that there are rules which cannot be broken. The authoritarian parent, on the other hand, is a very top-down parent. Remember, it can work. There are lots of countries very traditionally where parenting styles are like this, and that is expected. So I have a lot of clients who tell me, oh, I would never talk back to my dad, or my father's word was law in our family, things like that. And I'm not saying they were bad fathers. Does it work in today's times? That's up to you to decide. And there are permissive parents who are very undemanding, extremely responsive to every need of the child, but they don't really draw lines. So there's really no clear indication of what are the rules, what is the discipline, what can you do and what can't you do. And then there are the uninvolved parents, undemanding, neglectful. So it's laissez-faire. The child can do what they want and at their own risk, and life goes on. And again, you see those kind of parents too. Friends, here's where your teacher role comes in. Have you noticed that teachers are also authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and uninvolved? And I had a very interesting work done by a PhD student several years ago, where she explored leadership styles in companies, because she was essentially doing a kind of counseling industrial overlap in her work. She's doing very well currently in a management institute. So she explored what kind of styles and what kind of approach leaders have in organizations. And then she also approached leadership in parents. A lot of the research showed that children do not really think their parents are very effective leaders. So when children very honestly rated their parents, they decided that they're not the best of leaders, they're not the best of decision makers. But when it came to rating them, how do you think your parent has steered your life? It was excellent. So they had no issues with how their life had been steered by the parent, but they still were very objectively clear that, oh, my parent is not the smartest or the best leader around. I'm sure my children feel the same way, because a lot of the things I do, they find hugely funny. And I'm sure now with the world of technology, I need to rely on them more and more for teaching me how best to negotiate this online world. So once again, we realize that when it comes to a personality style, we are going to pretty much stick to that style, whether we teach or whether we parent. Now, let me come to my next question. Who is this talk for? Who is this session for? Ask yourself, do you associate parenthood, the phrase or the word parenthood, with a popular TV series or with a role? So what have I learned in my years as a teacher? It's so many years now. And, when I began, the students were like a few years younger than me. And now I think they're even younger than my own kids. So one has to learn that they come from a different generation. and generations shift much faster over time. So the gap between generations, the next generation of kids that come to study with you has sped up. So if it was a 10-year gap earlier, it's 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. So every next year. So for example, my second years find the first years in MA very different from where they are, right? Because times have shifted so fast. So it's very important for us to span this gap, and of course you are old, there's no question you are old, but um, or at least not as old as me, but way older than a lot of the students you are teaching, but they should still be able to connect with you in some way. Can you separate being a teacher from being a parent? Very, very important. You are not the parent of the youngsters that you are mentoring. They have their own parents and they are dealing with them for whatever they are worth. So you have to be very clear about drawing lines of your teacher role, however much you empathize with those students out there. You can reach out to them, but you cannot be their parent. And the last question, do you feel overwhelmed with the sheer pressure of balancing both? And that, friends, is what is happening currently because of the pandemic. As Madhuri told you right in the beginning, they're all of us doing balancing acts, trying to weigh the roles as best we can. And we have parents of young children in the house who need to share their devices with those children because their online schooling has started, and so on. So the next few slides, I'm going to bring to you actual experiences. Now, these are a merger of people who have been talking to me. So they are a merger of Indian experiences also. But for reasons of confidentiality, I cannot tell you who those people are because they would be my clients. So I have chosen to quote from work done abroad in other countries. And I have deliberately not gone to technical research studies, but to a lot of online resources. And I have quoted those resources. So I have tried to give credit to those resources from where I have borrowed these thoughts so that you too can sort of explore. So the idea is it's not a reference, but it is just a launch pad for you to start thinking about these aspects. In psychology, we do a lot of projective techniques, as all of you know. So I've just put in two fun pictures. We won't talk about them, but just, I think a picture speaks 1,000 words. So is this what is happening to us? I know it's happening to a lot of teachers who are sitting and listening today, a lot of the principals. I know of teachers who are from very tiny houses, and there is no place in the house which is sound free. And so some of them are sitting in the bathroom to try and attend webinars, and then the person who wants to use the bathroom has to knock very quietly so that they can come out, then the bathroom gets used, and then they go in and sit again. Sounds funny, but it's heartbreaking, right? It is not easy. So for all of us who have bigger spaces, who have enough devices to be able to learn and to teach, I think we should just count our blessings. How many of us right now are falling asleep at the keyboard? Little children most certainly are. I'm very sad to say that schools have sort of taken this whole, online learning very seriously, and they are doing 8 hours of teaching sometimes. Who can concentrate for 8 hours on a 1 foot by 8-inch screen? So I think these are just some thoughts to think about, but let me bring you to some of the issues which teachers are talking about. So what is this about? This slide, it's about teacher burnout during pandemic. Very important. I think it's echoing all our thoughts. One teacher says, I get to know kids in 100 little moments throughout each school day. You see, we cannot know the child through a screen. When the new school year starts, if I have new students, even MA students coming in, am I going to feel the same connect with them as I would have when they were living, breathing creatures in my classroom? And even when they are quietly eating something or they're taking a phone call, which they shouldn't, I can see them and share a little smile and say, no, phone should be off, that kind of thing. Very different on an online medium. Normally driven by an early alarm clock and bells throughout the school day, the fluidity of remote learning has left many teachers feeling unmoored. Many teachers are coming and telling me, ma'am, there's no check-in and check-out time. I'm working at 12 midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning because the day doesn't seem to end, because there is no hard end to any schedules. Now, some of us may be workaholics and some of us may actually be volunteering to do work late midnight, but that's by choice. And burnout will happen if you are having to do something not by choice. So you see what teachers are saying? Working from home is not what teachers signed up for. It's a huge challenge. We are not used to sitting at all during the day. Let me share a wonderful little anecdote of one of my PhD students who is a special teacher. Now, the work she does with her children with special education needs involves a lot of body work. You see, it's not face to face like this. A special education needs child cannot connect with a face talking to them all the time. So she has to clear up space in her house so that she can get up, move behind about 4 or 5 feet, and do a lot of movements, actions, jump, sing, engage the child. And you know what she told me? She said, ma'am, even when I'm doing this live, I feel I have to push a lot of energy through for the child to get what I'm trying to do. So how much energy will I have to push through the screen? I think it's a very valid concern. It's a sinkhole, one teacher says, that's hard to climb out of. And most importantly, a wonderful sharing. Never assume that the culture we had worked so hard to build in a classroom is already present. My dear friends, I see my friend Vibhuti is also joined us, one of the best teachers and researchers that I have known in SNDT. You see, as a teacher, when we go to our class, we are doing this very unknowingly. When we go in, and teacher and students have told me this later, it was a given that we can do this. It was a given. You never told us that we can't walk in late, but we felt we shouldn't walk in late. There was a culture. I have never till date, I'm telling you this, friends, I have never in all my 20, 30 years of teaching, I have never told students don't walk in late if you're late. It's Mumbai city, trains get late, you don't get a bus. Walk in, it's okay. Learning is learning. You want to learn in the last 10 minutes, it's fine. It doesn't disturb me. I have never told them don't eat in class because I know many of them leave home very early. They don't eat enough and then they don't feel well. So it's fine. As long as you don't disturb me, it's fine. But I do tell them that, look, these are not rules for all the teachers in the department. These are rules for me. So you might ask the other teachers what are their rules and do accordingly. But I am fine. As long as you don't disturb what I'm sharing with you, you can go ahead and do. Now, this cannot happen in online learning. We cannot build this culture. And so there have been experiences abroad, which teachers have shared in articles, that a new course that they started off just shut down because they didn't get time to build this culture. They just had to launch straight into their physics or math teaching, and that fell flat because it was not against a platform of the person who you are. So the message I want to bring out here, friends, is that we are teachers and we are parents, but we are persons first. And we will imbue the teaching and the parenting with the personhood that we bring to the platform. Please take care that you are sharing this personhood even if you are teaching online. We just heard Pokhriyalji speak yesterday about how we are going on a large platform for online teaching. It's going to be the mandate, the norm because of the pandemic. It's not going anywhere. At least a year or two are going to be eaten up. And we will have to do a lot of online learning and teaching. But do not forget that we are bringing up personhood. That is why we are good teachers or good parents. Now let us look at the parenting aspect. Okay, we've looked at the teacher aspect. Now the parenting aspect I'm going to cut down a little because I've got my eye on the clock and I don't want to exceed time. But keep in mind that in the place of two transitions, that is a worker who was trying to, or an employee who was trying to balance work and life, they had two transitions. One was from home to work and one was from work to home. Finished. It may be a horrible transition. It may be 2 hours of commute every day. It may be in a crowded train, but it was 2 transitions. And so, as Madhuri said, in the beginning, when the lockdown began, we were very excited. I said, wow, no more commuting. Great. I love this life. I don't want to go back to the normal again. But you see now what is happening? Now there are multiple transitions. You work, you look after the child. You work again, you go and arrange lunch. Man or woman, whoever you are in the house, there is a lunch to look for. You play with an infant, you get back to work. So these multiple transitions are playing on our brains. Our brains are not cut out for so many transitions in the day. Just to give a little gendered perspective for a little fun fact, I must tell you that female brains are way better at doing these multiple transitions. So we are kind of protected comparatively. The poor men, you saw them falling asleep on the desktop. This is just kidding, right? Okay, so the transition is adversely affecting our concentration, our productivity, and ultimately our creativity. So what should we do? We must learn to draw lines. We must learn to schedule our day, decide for ourselves what is cleaning home time, what is cooking time, what is meal time, what is watching Netflix time, what is work time, and what is preparation time and sleep time. So let me look at the 6 bullets that you see at the bottom of your screen. Parents have to do partner swaps. So forget about your traditional gender roles of daddy does this and mommy does this. It is essential that roles have to be now divided because all of them have their own work times and also the children's school times and college times and study times to look at. We need shorter shifts. We can't do 8-hour shifts. School can't be 8 hours. I was talking to a school management on one of these webinars and I said, friends, you're forgetting that 8 hours includes a recess, includes playtime, includes value education, includes time out there playing football, includes school bus time. All this is lost. So do not squeeze in content into 8 hours. Your children are not learning anything. So pool your resources, have shorter shifts, have clear-cut shifts where you shut your screen and that is it for the day. Use partner swaps. Last 3 very important concepts. Very, very, very important. I cannot underline them enough. I'll start from the bottom, your right side bottom of the screen. Sleep hygiene. Are we getting, see, earlier we used to complain that we are sleep deprived, we're not getting enough sleep, so much of work, so much of travel, so much of teaching, so much of preparation. But we are still not getting enough sleep. Why? Something is wrong. We are not scheduling our time correctly. What about computer fatigue? There is a lot. People are complaining of shoulder pain, back pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, eye strain. And Zoom fatigue, a huge hat as a neuropsychologist telling you why. When you're working on a screen, friends, first of all, you cannot resist the temptation to multitask. So when a meeting is going on, you will quickly reduce your screen, go to your mail, answer a few mails. So you are already, you're pressuring your brain a lot more than you would in a face-to-face meeting. 1. Second, when you communicate with each other, you are used to getting signals from the other person. You talk, the person nods. You say something, the person smiles. In an environment like this, I have to wait a millisecond for that reaction to come. So you see, I have to make a correction in my mind saying at 11:40 I said this and at 11:41 I got the response. So I have to make the correction in my mind saying, oh, okay, so they like that joke I made and they smile. Very unnatural. Tires my brain out doing this. So all that synesthesia that we are working, what we see, what we hear and so on is gone. Lastly, how does your device work right now? If I want to give you a sense that I'm looking into your eyes and, like a therapist, person-to-person connection, speaking absolutely personally to you, where am I looking? I'm looking into the camera of my device. But where are the faces? They're all over my screen. So if I want to see the reaction of the person, my eye has to move elsewhere. But then you feel you're not looking at me, you're not talking to me, you're talking to somebody else. You see how it happens in a class. Sometimes you notice some student is getting very restless, so you start looking at them and talking for some time, and then they realize, okay, ma'am is looking at me, so they settle down. That doesn't work here. So what I'm trying to tell you is this is not the new normal. It is not normal at all. It is abnormal. So let us look at a few more tips for what we need to do before I end off my session in another about 10 minutes, telling you about some very interesting research that we have been doing. But please, please look after this. There is a whole body of research out there on what is being called cyber housekeeping. Just as you learn to keep your house clean, when your vegetables, your food, your packets, your groceries come in, you sanitize, you pack, you put them properly in the appropriate shelves. Do that with your files. Clean up your hard disk, clean up your, I'm sure all of your hard disks are looking horrible right now because you just kept attending webinars and saving up stuff and you don't know where it all is. This is the only channel that is alive right now, my friends, as teachers. This is the only channel right now to communicate. So please have a good antivirus, have your firewalls in place, update your software. Most of us are very used to having institutions doing that for us. No, we have to do it for ourselves now. Set strong passwords, add layers of authentication, back up regularly, and use all kinds of encryption. Ask the youngest person will tell you what to do, because they are really the digital, the knowledgeable guys. We are the migrants. We don't know how to deal, how to negotiate with this space. Let me move on to some of the very interesting work I'm doing, and I think most of the questions are likely to be from here. What age group are we looking at? Okay, so now let's set aside this whole aspect of whether we are negotiating the pandemic as teachers or whether we are negotiating the pandemic as parents. What age group are we looking at? Children. If you are teachers, some of you may be, some of you may have family members who have school teachers, as a role that they have to play. So what are the concerns? Screen time, cyber safety, child porn has gone up exponentially in the pandemic. We used to restrict screen time. Young mothers are asking me, we used to set a limit, half an hour, no more screen. Now, where is the choice? You have to allow the child to share your device. So there are a lot of concerns about screen time for children. And I'm doing some very interesting work with responsible netizen to ensure that cyberbullying is controlled, that cyber safety is brought in as one of the big targets for school counselors in the coming days. What about adolescents? Very interesting phenomenon here. You see, all parents are talking about adolescents in social media, adolescents and relationships, adolescents and sexual safety. And a lot of parents are telling me, currently I'm not worried, because he or she is not going out anywhere. So I know where they are. I know they're not up to any naughty business, and I'm very happy right now. But how long is this going to last? So finally, you have to trust your adolescent. You cannot police them and say, okay, lockdown, stay at home, and you're going to be safe from social media and sexual safety issues. All of us have been watching boys' locker room and all the terrible things that are happening. We've been watching it, the impact of social media and adolescents. So this lockdown is not forever. Gaming is a massive, massive challenge. I'm going to share with you a very interesting report that we came out with, in which most children in Maharashtra, and I'm not talking about metropolitan Maharashtra, I'm talking about deep village Maharashtra, children are talking about being addicted to PUBG, addicted to games, staying up till 6 a.m. and not able to focus on studies or work because although they know that they shouldn't, and many of them have also been cyberbullied, they have been stalked, they have been harassed online, but they have not told their parents. And young adults, career trajectories, what choices are they going to make in the future? There are lots and lots of choices. And now as the world opens up because of the pandemic, you see, that is the opportunity hidden in that challenge, that suddenly international universities will be offering so much because they need people to register with them. So more choices, more freedom, free courses, free software, which is suddenly available, which was not there before. So more confusion. These are some of the issues psychosocially, which we will have to negotiate both as teachers and as parents. So let me quickly end the last 10 minutes of my talk. I hope I have that much time. Yes, I do. So some of the quick sharings about partnerships as a teacher, parent, mentor. Like I told you in the beginning, I've been amazingly lucky that I've been able to, I was blessed with all these roles right from the beginning. And even my IPH, my Community Mental Health Center, where I've been a kind of a partner, a trustee from the beginning, has brought me very close to how community mental health needs to be negotiated even in these times. And we are trying to publish something about how even rehab activities for people with schizophrenia can be taken forward in times like this. So quick three areas. One is shackle free. Shackle free is a model which I'm trying to build for substance and non-substance addiction prevention, and I'll come to that in a little bit. Youth mental health, I think, is something all of us should be and are concerned about. I know every person who is attending this webinar in their own institutions is doing a lot to build up youth mental health, to offer counseling to the students, to offer support. And even at a national central level, there is a lot happening with Manodarpan, and even in SNDT, we have an entire activity of online counseling, which we are offering very actively as a Department of Psychology. And I'm very happy to say that it's going very well. So this kind of a dialogue that we are setting up with our own university students is really working well. And the last aspect, which I already told you about, of cyber safety, and I'll come to the report which we worked on. Now, this was very exciting for me. Understanding Internet Usage Trends of Children Across Maharashtra 2020 is a report that we just released about 10 days ago. And what was most exciting for me for this is that my students of the department could partner. Many of them are listening to this on YouTube, so they'll be very proud. They could partner in the writing of this report. So what we did is, and you will see the credit that has been given in this white paper, which we came out with support of MCPCR, MSCRT, with the NMIMS researchers, as well as the SNDT Women's University Department of Psychology students. And this report was released released earlier this month, and it released the data of 148 participants. Sorry, that number is wrong. It should be 1148 participants from 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th standard from 18 schools all over Maharashtra. So close to 1,200 participants, and 88 or 89% of these students were between 12 and 15 years of age. As I already shared with you, they have been very honest, and they have shared how much there is harassment, hacking, PUBG addiction, lack of sleep. Many of them are aware of the dark web. Many of them are aware of guns and drugs and sex being negotiated over the web. Did you and I know of these things? Friends, do you and I even know of these called a deep web and something called the dark web, and that guns and other things can be made available on this? Please warn me if the internet goes, okay? Because I'm getting messages that it's unstable. So this report was released at the hands of the Commissioner of Education of Maharashtra State, along with Maharashtra Cyber Peace and MCPCR authorities, as well as me and my students and some of my colleagues who were able to attend. And we are hoping that this report will be released by Central Ministry. And I hope more than that, more than the honor of getting this report released, I think it is the utility of being able to share design interventions and strategies to protect children from cyber threats. Our children are our future. We cannot afford, pandemic or no pandemic, cyber threat or no cyber threat, we cannot afford this future to go downhill. Shackle Free also addresses this. We are trying to build preventive programs designed around a life skills model for non-substance or behavioral addictions also, over and above substance addictions. So gaming addictions, looking at pornography online, gambling addictions, streaming content addictions, internet addictions, social media addictions. And there's a small paper which I've come up with, which will be published next month, which actually talks about the neuropsychological substrates of why adolescents are prone so much to these addictions, because their brain is at that state of flux. The USP of Shackle Free, once again, I think our lives as teachers are all about our students. So the USP is that the MA students of psychology will be trained in this module. So they will be already trainers when they get out of the department. And I think that that will help this to spread, and we are not going to charge it in any way. It's going to be a free online available module, and it will be used, I'm sure, by counselors and teachers. So it's going to be a very, very simple module without any technicalities. Coming towards the end of my presentation, we have, I think, now well accepted that as teachers, as parents, basically we are mentors. Many of us have adult learners. They are responsible citizens. They have their own life plans. They have their own life goals. We are not in charge of running their lives. No, they have their own lives. They have to have the freedom of choice. But should they have a mentor to handhold? Yes. The power to impact the course of students' academic and personal trajectories, my friends, is a power you have been blessed with as a teacher. If we don't do that, we will have wasted our careers, walked away looking at it as a job and not as a vocation. Yesterday in Pokhriyalji's session, he mentioned Sarvapalli Radhakrishnanji, who said that teaching is not a job. It is a vocation. It is an avocation. It is something that you are sort of अपने आप को समर्पित कर देते हैं. That is what Radhakrishnanji said. Trust is the glue that binds students' academic and personal lives. It helps us help them make sense of their future. So we need to build trust with our students. Therefore, as I said, we have to invest who we are, not only what we know. Teaching what we know is one part of what we do, but sharing what we are is a more important part to my mind. Building self-regulation or executive function. Again, I'm speaking as a neuropsychologist. Our frontal lobes have our executive function. Lobes are getting shaped in this very powerful age of adolescence and young adulthood. We have to make use of this and have to teach students self-regulation. That is why shackle-free, that is why controlling cyberbullying and so on. And most importantly, friends, we have to make them develop self-awareness. They have their own passions. We have to foster these passions. We have to give them the power to use these passions and make the best of their life. I think every student deserves a mentor. I think every teacher is a mentor. Every parent is definitely a mentor. How much we do this and how seriously we take this responsibility is entirely up to us. Will we come out at the other end of this pandemic having learned these lessons? I hope so. Are we open today to the needs of our students? I certainly hope so. But at the same time, a mentor is no use to anybody if they don't look after themselves. So are we also trying to look after ourselves in the process so that we come out stronger at the other end of the pandemic? Again, I hope so. I'm trying to utilize for myself, other than the work I'm doing for the university, for the students, for community and so on. I'm currently trying to write a book which I'm calling in Marathi. The book is in Marathi. I have about 10, 11 books. You know, this, I just want to share it, end this on a sharing. I come from 3 generations of Marathi writers. My grandmother was a very well-known Marathi writer, and so was my mother. And so I never, ever thought that I could write in Marathi. I had a big chip on my shoulder. I had studied in English. I had done my PhD in English. I teach in English. I never thought, I always had this big hang up that Marathi to main kabhi likh nahi paungi. I don't have the language. I knew it. I was speaking it at home, but I never thought I had it enough to write books. Then I got married and came to Thane, and I looked around me and I met people like Anand Nadkarni and Shubha Thatte and stalwarts like this out, you know, their language tripped off their tongue. Their Marathi was so beautiful, it was like poetry. And I got an even bigger complex. I said, ye to main bilkul nahi kar sakti. Then I got encouraged. I said, no, let me try. So I started writing in Marathi, and my first drafts would go to my mother. She still reads all my first drafts. So she told me, you know what is wrong? You're thinking in English and you're writing in Marathi. So all your sentences are ulta. The structure of grammar of Marathi is different. So now I take it as a learning, and I find my own language getting more beautiful as the days pass. It will never reach the level of my mother or my grandmother, but I'm happy with what I'm writing. So the book I'm currently attempting is called Chuklela Trairashik. Trairashik is a math sum that my grandfather's generation learned, in which there are three components, and how lives go astray when one of those components go wrong. You know, your own life decisions, the people you are with, and life circumstances. Let that not happen to you in this pandemic. Keep your life clean, mindful, stress-free, be there for your students, and most of all, be there for yourself. Thank you very much. I enjoyed doing this session. Thank you. Madhuri, mute. You're on mute. Madhuri?
Yeah, Madhuri, please unmute and then talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Somni ma'am, for a brilliant session and a wonderful presentation that you made with those luminous tips, right from teacher being a parent and parent being a teacher, which definitely enhances to enrich our both the roles very effectively, being authoritative, adopting that authoritative parenting style, and how to cope with these multiple transitions from one role to another role, which is definitely affecting our productivity as well as family life, but how to cope with it so effectively by, marking that what we call as Lakshman Resha between our teacher's role and a parent's role whenever required. Thank you so much. Now, I think we go for question answer session, and it's over to Dr. Aarti Verma. Dr. Aarti.
Good afternoon, one and all. Myself, Aarti Verma, is here to moderate question answer session. Very first, I would like to say the session was indeed very informative. It was very apt, and it is applicable to current COVID situation for parents as well as for the teachers. Now, my first question here is how to reduce screen time of the children and the youngsters, which is one of the biggest challenge that parents are facing. And this question is by Dr. Madhumita Madam.
Dr. Somni.
Sony madam, please unmute and speak. Madam, please unmute yourself. Okay,
No, I had just lost connectivity actually. So I went on Jio and I've come back. Thank God it didn't go during the session. Yes, I heard only half the question because I lost connectivity. It was about screen time, how to control screen time, but for which age group?
How to reduce screen time of children and the youngsters, which is one of the biggest challenge for the parents they are facing today.
Yeah. So I think two things. One is that the more sensible educational institutions, like Madhuri introduced me, I'm also a grandparent. So I'm speaking for my own little fellow, 6.5 years old. So they are very wise. They have kept 1 hour school in the morning, 1 hour school in the afternoon. That makes a lot of sense. So first of all, I think parents should negotiate. They should, I think they should take on their role as consumers, not as passive recipients of education for their child from the school. So they should underline their role as parents and talk to the school authority saying our child cannot concentrate for 8 hours. So please reduce that screen time, one. Second, I think it's very important to not treat online learning like the holy grail. Online learning is not the be all and end all. What is happening, friends, now is that because there is all these different fancy platforms on which you teach, everyone is adopting those platforms. And everything is going on WebEx and Zoom and, GoToMeeting and Google Meets. There is no need. Sometimes you can do something simple like give a 10-minute input and let the parents work with the child on their own. So I think these are the two ways. One, negotiate with the school and talk about what best can be done for the child. Second, to add on other activities which are non-screen linked. So the child is kept busy intellectually, emotionally, socially, and yet is learning. I think those are the two ways.
Yes. Now, due to online learning, the eye contact and the personal contact is missing.
Yeah.
So how can we cope up with that?
Again, I'm going to ask you which age group. Because for a small child, you're going to need another co-teacher like the parent.
Actually,
so you're going to have
not mentioned. Dr.
Right.
Kishore Anshali sir have mentioned the question.
Right. So I'm answering that as a little child, a parent of a little child, you need to be a co-teacher. You have to sit with the child. You can't tell the child sit with the screen and learn on your own. No. But if you're talking about adult learners, I think we as teachers need to negotiate this also. What works for us. So for example, for me, what do I do? I learned about Zoom bombing and knew what was happening on Zoom. So then I moved to Google Meets. So then I started taking classes on Google Meets, and I found that it's much better to take an interactive class than to take a lecture, because these are postgraduate students. Even if I record a lecture and send it to them, they will listen to it. But where is the interaction?
Yes.
So I had a panel of 25 students, I had a chat box with 25 students asking questions. Then I also developed a peer learning strategy. So I took for my first years, I took in 4 or 5 of my very bright second years and made them the peer teachers. So they would join me in these sessions, and I would suddenly stop in the middle and say, okay, now this part, I'm sure you all also had this difficulty last year, because last year you were new learners for this course. So how did you negotiate it? So they would give them their inputs. They would give the first years their inputs, which is something I can't give now. It's too many years now since I've learned that course. So I will never have that first-hand experience. So I think it's important for us teachers to mix and match, do a little bit of sending reading material, do a little bit of phone calls. So I've written to my students that 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, I'm available on phone. So you can call me up. So every student has that need, that I want to ask this personally. I don't want to ask it on a chat box on the screen. So I think it's important, but again, to the degree possible. If you give 24 hours to students to call you up, they'll call you up at 1 o'clock at night saying, I'm studying, so now I have a question. So you have to make boundaries.
Yes. The next question is, it may be difficult for all our students to access online due to their economic issues.
Absolutely.
So how do they attend and how to
No, I completely agree with you. It is not, I don't think we can assume. I completely agree that if we are to offer online learning and online examinations, first we have to bridge the gap. First, we have to ensure that all students are on the same level in terms of access, which we are not in a position to do right now. Therefore, we have to fall back on resources that we have. So like I said, if I say that I will remediate, I will help you out in bits that you didn't understand, I'm available on phone from this time to this time. So a student generally at least has access to a voice call. They can at least make a phone call and ask. Another strategy which I've been using very widely is I refer them to read things which they already have. You see, we are very attuned, like we feel, okay, now they're in postgraduate, so they must also only read postgraduate stuff. But there is so much material in their undergraduate books which they've not gone into in depth. And if I ask them, tell me something that you read in TY, they will tell me. So I say, right, now go back and read this and pair it off with something that you are able to get from this book. And I share that soft copy with them. Now, maybe they can't access that soft copy, but usually they can. So, I think it's important to rely on simpler options. Don't go for the fancier options. Like there are lots of options of online tools, which in fact we all also have been learning from. from our EduTech department, and they're fantastic. Like Jamboards are great, Google Groups are great, Google quizzes are great, but not all students can access them. So what use are they?
Can media play some role between teachers and today's youngster generation?
I think so. I think media in what way, I will tell you. As a teacher, I have always been using examples from popular media. I'll give you some examples. I asked students in class, tell me a rational song and tell me an irrational song. तो तुम मुझे ना मिलो तो कोई बात नहीं, किसी और को की बनोगे तो मुश्किल होगी. Very irrational song. It has led to acid attacks. You know, if a child feels, a boy feels or a girl feels that this partner is not mine. So I wrote a Maharashtra Times piece on this. किसी और की होगी तो मुश्किल होगी, and it was a well-read piece. So I have always used popular songs. I have done programs like Pitara on Vivid Bharati. So I think it's important to use media. Madhuri mentioned Prakash Doot, which Anand and I have done together, Anand Nadkarni and I. So what do we do in that? We try to teach concepts of depression and concepts of alcohol abuse using popular Hindi film songs. So, you know, we say, मेरा पढ़ने में नहीं लागे दिल पे क्या पड़ गई मुश्किल. So maybe the girl is depressed. People find it funny because they associate it with a love-lorn Jaya Bhadri. But it's true, right? Like depression, you don't have appetite, you don't have sleep, you don't feel like studying. So it's a good mnemonic. Students can understand this well. Another important point, I'm working with a very nice group with Dr. Ashish Deshpande, who are trying to take school mental health very seriously. And we just had an advisory board meeting 4 days back, and I have been telling them, use radio. I think radio has tremendous reach. And, you know, if authorities in the country, leaders in the country can use radio, why can't teachers use radio? I think community radio, Prakash Javadekar ji has been saying community radio is doing good work. I think our students are very attuned to using all technology. I think they would love it if we have radio programs, if we have TV shows, if media can become our partners in sharing all our concepts. I'm not talking about only mental health concepts, economics concepts, sociology concepts, everything. I think it will be wonderful because it's high time that we came out of our ivory tower and made people realize that education is available and free. It is not limited to universities.
Very well explained, ma'am. The last question for the day. Nowadays,
let it be the last question since it is 12:40, Aarti.
Yes.
We have Geeta Chadha ready. So
yes,
they can definitely mail us the questions which we can forward it to Dr.
Absolutely.
Sony.
I'm sorry, Geeta's waiting and I saw her right from the beginning. Nice to see you. I'm looking forward to your session.
So nowadays, due to the current situation, there are overdose of webinars. So how to balance between the personal and professional life?
Good question. I'm hearing very funny stories from my colleagues, and again, for confidentiality reasons, I will not reveal who these colleagues are. But there are people, you know, who take on a student mode, and they want to be seen on this webinar also and that webinar also as attendees. So they do one on the phone and one on the laptop. How much sense does it make? I mean, you're not listening to either. So I think the answer is to pick well, to decide what you want, to make a request to the people conducting the webinar to share a recording later so that you can go through it later if you missed it for some reason. And most importantly, please share all this with your students. This is not only for us. They are the real learners. Apna time aayega, unka, lekin apna time to gaya abhi. So, you know, give it to them. Let them benefit from every free webinar that you're getting, because they will give you multifold back what you have taught them today. So thank you and all the best, and looking forward to hearing Geeta now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Over to Madhuri, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Aarti, for handling question answer very beautifully. And thank you, Dr. Sony, once again for being with us. And dear participants, all these sessions for last 3 days, I consider them as trailers because such much film to baki hai. They are just the thought-provoking sessions, and it is our responsibility to take upon from each session that whatever is most applicable for us and try to implement in our professional and personal lives. Now we are reaching towards the destination and we are moving towards sociological perspective to navigate pandemic, for which I request Dr. Shobha Bharat to take over. And yes, the speaker is Dr. Geeta Chadha. We welcome you, ma'am, in our session, and over to Dr. Shobha Bharat. Shobha.
Thank you, Madhuri. I'm really proud to introduce the resource person for the second session of the day, Dr. Geeta Chadha. I met Dr. Geeta Chadha when I attended the refresher course at Mumbai University on gender studies. Believe me, every day, every session was meticulously planned, and we really were thrilled every minute of the course. So I'm really, really happy to have her on board. For a more formal introduction, Dr. Geeta Chadha has completed her doctorate in sociology from the University of Mumbai. Her PhD research was titled Gender, Genius and Scientific Intuition, a Feminist Perspective. She is currently a faculty member at the Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai, and on the international program of University of London in Mumbai. She has developed frameworks for feminist archiving at the Research Center for Women's Studies, SNDT Women's University. She has designed and taught a first of its kind course in feminist science studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She has also designed innovative pedagogic initiatives for integrating science and social science teaching. She is a member of the BOS in social work, development studies, women's studies at Mumbai University, SNDT, and IGNOU. She is a chairperson of Mumbai University's Women's Development Cell and the board member of Akshar. She has another dimension to her personality. She has published several articles on science criticism in reputed peer-reviewed academic journals. She has also written 2 volumes on feminists and science, which are co-edited with Sumi Krishna. She has co-edited a special issue entitled Feminist Science Studies, Intersectional Narratives of Persons in Gender Marginalized Locations in Science. Thank you so much, Geeta ma'am, for joining us. Over to Geeta ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm sure everybody is waiting to go and serve lunch to the family and eat lunch themselves. But I'm honored and privileged, and I'd like to thank the P.N. Doshi Women's College, the principal, Dr. Asha Menon, Shobha Bharat, the coordinator of this virtual conference, and MUKTA. I'd like to thank you for inviting me for this conference. And of course, it's a pleasure to see Dr. Vibhuti Patel here. It's always nice to talk in the same platform as her. So I'm going to start. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Sony, Anuradha Sony, for that lovely, thoughtful session. So let me start with my all right. So sociology is a peculiar sort of a discipline, and let me try and we are in a state right now where we are actually in the middle of the pandemic. So it's difficult to theorize, but it's important to comprehend what's going on around us and make sense of it. Very well-known sociologist, British sociologist, Anthony Giddens, who has written a lot on risk societies. And I'll quote him and say, he says, apocalypse has become banal a state of statistical parameters to everyone's existence. What he's actually probably trying to say is that all of us, and I ask you this question honestly, isn't this how we are feeling in the present moment of the virus, the pandemic, and the lockdown? It seems quite apocalyptic. It seems like it's the end of the world. It seems also, on the other hand, very banal because we have to do very, very practical things. It has been converted by the scientists into statistics and models and calculations of how will the virus spread, when will the lockdown end, when should it end, all these questions. So there's one major part of this pandemic experience, and that is that it seems apocalyptic. And on the other hand, there it seems to be quite banal because you have to do a lot of these very, very pragmatic and practical things. So how do we attempt a sociological understanding of this event and this experience? Here, C. Wright Mills spoke about the sociological imagination, and I think it's quite an important tool for any sociologist. And what is the sociological imagination? As C. Wright Mills says, it's a vivid awareness of the relationship between experience and the wider society. He emphasized the importance of seeing the connections between social structure and individual experience, and also human agency, human beings' ability to do things, to transform situations. He urged us to recognize that what we often experience as personal troubles, like, I lost my job, I am having a mental breakdown, or I'm not able to reach home. He actually says that it's important that we understand these as public issues connected to social structures and orders rather than as personal troubles. He, of course, also suggests that therefore autobiography must be connected with history. I would suggest that the sociological imagination also allows us to connect the everyday life world with the macro structures of society, and that's what I'm going to try and attempt today. The question, of course, is whose experience, whose biography do we wish to privilege in our analysis? Our own? Whose history, whose society do we want to write in? Just our own? So my discipline of sociology actually is a critical one and an empathic one. It actually urges us to think about inequalities and injustice. It urges us to talk about people at the most marginal locations. And therefore, I will make this presentation looking at 5 axes, or let's say lenses, of marginal experience and analysis: class, caste, gender, tribe, and religious minorities. And we'll try to talk about how each of these, the experience of the pandemic is seen differently or understood differently in these through these lenses. Now, class. I'm sure when Vibhuti Ben talked to you about her presentation, you must have heard a lot about how the poorest of the poor are the worst hit in this pandemic. The middle classes have a home to go back to, have a home to stay in. We've heard of stories, and we continue to hear of stories of people who are going, aiming or wishing to go back to their homes and are struggling, are unable to do it. And people who've died on the way home, people who've lost their dear ones on the way home. So the entire informal sector, the entire migrant population is actually being now worst affected by the pandemic. Dipankar Gupta, the well-known sociologist, actually says something very interesting. He says that this pandemic actually started with people who were passport holders, who could do air travel. It started with largely the elite. That's how the pandemic actually, the corona was spread. Instead of putting those sections in the lockdown in the early stage, he says that we are in a situation today where we lock down everything. Something that starts with the upper class actually goes a full circle round. And today you have the Kent ad. I'm sure some of you have seen the Kent ad, which of course came under a lot of flack. The Kent ad, which is actually saying, have you checked whether your domestic help has washed her hand before doing the atta in the house? I'm sure you can't, so well, buy the machine. Look at the levels at which it's working. It's reinforcing our class bias. It's almost the threat for a domestic worker to lose her work as machines come up. So what Dipankar Gupta tries to suggest, I think, is that now we are making the poor as the contagion. Something that started with the upper classes, today we are actually beginning to talk about the lower classes as the problem. When we identify hotspots in a city, we are talking about the slums, we are talking about, oh, well, look at India, there's such a big population problem, impossible to do social distance because of the low classes. So it's almost sort of reproducing a very, very problematic class structure. I move on now to caste. It's interesting that social distancing, the language of social distancing, has become central to this pandemic. There have been questions about it. Why are we calling it social distancing? We should be calling it physical distancing. The WHO has actually said that probably that's a better way to put it. And yet the language of social distancing persists. In a society like India, for example, this language, when it feeds into the caste society that we have lived in, it becomes extremely problematic for people at the lower end of the caste order. People who belong to the lower caste, people who are Dalit, have already been stigmatized in the kind of societies that we live in. They've been humiliated, they've been marginalized. Now, in this context, for example, when we hear about things like, well, the world is now becoming using namaste and is using vegetarianism as a way of coming out of the pandemic, it is what we've always been doing. You can understand how it actually creates a problem for people and for the society, Indian society at large, which is written by caste hierarchies, but is trying to find its way out also. So when we see that, the pandemic actually affects everybody equally, the virus affects everybody equally, anybody who's living in the high rise or is belonging to the lowest caste strata, we're actually making a mistake because we must recognize that the virus might hit everyone, perhaps. That also we're not sure because it is supposed to hit women less, by the way. Anyway, we argue saying that, the pandemic, the virus is actually spread out to, equally to everyone. And therefore we are all in the same boat. But the question that a lot of Dalit intellectuals and people are asking is, are we really in the same boat in our experiences of the pandemic and of the lockdown? For example, if you take the labor scavenging, manual scavenging, the labor, health professionals we are talking about, we are not even talking about the scavengers and the kind of issues of health and hygiene and the increased probability of them getting the infection. Yeah. The third axis, of course, that I'd like to look on is the axis of gender, something that we've all been talking about. Very early on, when I first heard about stay at home, and my immediate reaction was, what will happen to women? Yeah, we know that the home for a large number of women across class and caste and religion is not a safe place. Maximum amount of violence happens at home. And what we've seen very soon, the National Commission of Women came up with the statistics showing that abuse at home has increased remarkably Okay, the number of cases on helplines has increased remarkably. So violence at home has increased. Important thing also to understand is that the sexual division of labor at home, which Anuradha also spoke about, and how the sexual division of labor at home actually is leading. It always was a double burden for women, but now with technological skills added, and what is happening to the women when they are at home, the pressure, the burden of handling work at home, of handling household labor, of handling all this together at one time. The question is that will we actually move into a stage where we hope to recognize the value of household labor? Especially I'm thinking women might recognize, middle class women who otherwise did not recognize the value of the work done by the woman who came home to do household work. I'm hoping that it will help build solidarities between women. Of course, sex workers who are already stigmatized have been further impoverished. And we were talking about this the other day also, about how sex workers are articulating similar sentiments like the migrant workers, that the virus might not kill us. By the way, cases among sex workers of the virus are almost negligible, okay, almost not there. So they are saying that we are going to die because our livelihood is getting over. Yeah, it's getting finished. And we are going to die not because of the virus, but because of poverty. Yeah. Of course, we also know about the case for trans people, the hijras and other trans people belonging to the lower classes, the stigmatization, the kind of work that they do. The lockdowns have put them way below the poverty level that they were at earlier also. I think we talk very little about tribes. I was just reading a report about Native Americans and what they are, the indigenous people in America, and they were talking about, they were actually saying, interestingly, you know, this is nothing new to us. We've always got diseases from non-tribal populations. This is one more thing. Okay. In our case, for example, when we look at the tribal question, especially in the season from March to June, what happens, a lot of minor forest products get sold, and the livelihood of the tribal people is based on the selling of the tendu leaf and all of that, which has completely gotten disturbed, and without any thought given by the state to the whole idea. The work that they do in terms of artists, in terms of songsters, in terms of coming out into the cities with their performative work, that has also actually got completely effective. And we don't seem to even think that that question is a central one. You know, what does social distancing or what does staying at home mean to people from tribal communities? And what we've been hearing are actually some positive reports of how actually tribal people are actually practicing social distancing far better than the urban poor are able to do. So maybe there's something to, you know, take away from there. The last axis that I want to look at is religious minorities. You know, we all know the kind of communalized atmosphere that we have been living in. Yeah, a pandemic like this, we think, should actually bring people together. Yeah, because it seems like it is going to hit everyone, right? So how come we don't come together? Interestingly, what we are seeing is that religious divide actually is increasing. It's getting more ossified by the media, by the state forces, and it is actually creating or deepening the divides, whether it is of again creating this idea of the other as being the contagion. So this has happened globally, but you also see in India, where a certain religious community is marked as the contagion, as responsible for spreading the virus. We know that religious pilgrims everywhere in the world have been the sites of the spread of the pandemic, no doubt. But we tend to sort of mark only those communities that we wish to. We've seen also in India, for example, religious rituals associated with death have gotten affected because of the pandemic. Communities are negotiating with the state, no doubt. But for example, for the Christian community, for example, if there is a need, or if the dead have to be buried, they have to be buried. But on the other hand, now there is there was at least a move to say that no, burials are not allowed, they will have to be cremated. Now, the trauma that this can cause to the community is something that we collectively need to think about. In this context, but I'd also like to talk about the positive roles that have been played by the religious minorities. And we've seen a lot of Sikh gurdwaras that have opened up for community kitchens, that have opened up as shelters. So it's interesting how religious minorities are also playing an important role in managing the COVID. Yeah. So I've been thinking about this, that, there is a sociologist called Harold Garfinkel. He works as an ethno-methodologist. It's a school, a theoretical school that developed in the 60s. What it basically says is that the way to study societies is to actually break existing everyday patterns, predictable patterns, and to actually then see how the structure operates. So for example, he would ask his students to do very interesting experiments, like go home and behave like lodgers in their own family to see how the family will react. For example, he used to do things like experiments in conversation. So suppose if I say, hello, how are you, good morning, you will be, experiment with me and say, oh, what do you mean by how are you, physically, socially, psychologically, emotionally? And, this kind of experiment then rattles the person who is being asked these questions back. And it's interesting to see how that person will then restore order. Now, these experiments actually were done by Harold Garfinkel in the everyday micro level. Now, suppose if we were to think about the pandemic actually as becoming a very big macro level structural breach. Nobody intended it, it happened. So for example, social distancing, staying at home, these are not normal parts of our everyday worlds. And now that is actually happening. And it's almost a kind of a natural breach that is going on in the society that we are living in. Yeah. How does it help us? Or what are we seeing when this breach is going on? And I'd like to say something very simple, which I think is also something we know at our gut common sense level. But it's important to see that the state, the society, the market, the communities are all, on the one hand, reproducing existing structures, as I showed you, of class, caste, gender, these hierarchies, these borders are being, boundaries are being reproduced, and being reproduced much more aggressively in some way, because everybody thinks about themselves. I have to protect me, myself, and my group, my community. Yeah. So on the one hand, you see the heightening of this kind of self-preservation, and all forces working towards the dominant group self-preservation. And interesting, as we were also discussing the other day in another seminar, is that it is also showing us immense reflexivity in the civic society. And this is what actually Anthony Giddens predicted. He said that in modern societies, you will see risks increasing. And the pandemic is a huge risk. It is both an external risk on which we don't have control, and it's both a manufactured risk which we have produced ourselves with the kind of development paradigms that we have gone for, with the kind of environmental breaches we have done. Yeah, so we are responsible for it. And yet it seems like something that has happened.
फोकट सब है, सबके उसमें एक एक आ जाएगा, सर्टिफिकेट मिलती है ना, तो सर्टिफिकेट मिल जाएगी अपने कॉलेज में देखा
Yeah, please continue, Geeta. Sorry. Yeah. Unmute. Geeta, please unmute.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing is, thank you. So what we are seeing is, on the one hand, we are seeing forces reproducing structures of exclusion, of hierarchy. And on the other hand, we are also seeing civic society groups, NGOs, and to some extent in some states, even governments, actually showing a lot of reflexivity on what needs to be done and where we have gone wrong. So it's an interesting sort of a scenario that we are seeing, and which we hope will help us to go somewhere better. So where do we go from here? Ulrich Beck is another risk theorist who says neither science nor politics, mass media, business, or the military are in a position to do anything about these things, risks rationally. So then if we cannot do rationally, and I sort of agree that doing things, planning, like the way we are doing that simulation, modeling, lockdown has to end at this time or that time, when will it end? What is the best time? What is the means to flatten it? All that is important. We need to do that. But as Zygmunt Bauman, another very, very well-known sociologist of modernity, says that it is actually a moral challenge. You judge a society by what it does to the life and the living of the weak. Yeah. So I think the greatest contribution of my discipline is to be able to give us this perspective from the marginal groups and to take this up as a moral challenge as much as it is a rational or a political challenge. Yeah. And I think there is no choice but to move towards global solidarities of interdependence between nations, and hopefully between across nations, and hopefully between the marginal and the powerful too. So for example, we are all waiting for the vaccine to be developed, right? So I was listening to well-known, I think, epidemiologist Gagandeep Kang, and she was talking about how when the vaccine is produced, and India is the largest producer of vaccines, yeah, globally. But when the vaccine is produced, how do we go about it? Yeah, at the moment, what we are seeing is, like communities, even sustain our nation, we have to protect ourselves. But this seems to be a pandemic. The definition of a pandemic is that it is global, right? So suppose now imagine a scenario where the vaccine is produced. Who should get the vaccine? Is it a question of morality or not? Ethical question or not? So her argument is, rather than a country giving vaccines, if it is, of course, easily available and cheap, we don't know what it will be like. Yeah. But suppose if it is, let's say hypothetically think that it's possible, then do you give the vaccine to everybody in one country? Do you give it to the rich first? Do you give it to the poor first? Do you give it to the women first? Do you give it to whom first? So argument is that if the vaccine is developed and if its efficacy is shown, this needs to be globally prioritized, and the prioritization has to happen to health workers across the globe. It has to happen to all people across the globe because they are at risk. In India, I would say, frankly, the vaccine should go to the people who are working in extremely risky environments, not to people who can stay at home. Yeah. So whom to give the vaccine to will also be a moral question, both at the national and at the global level. I hope this simple and small presentation helped you to probably see how to enter the discourse of pandemic. There are many questions that I could have spoken about, but I thought I'll just present it in this simple way. And I'll say thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay critical, and stay empathic. I mean, let's not just take everything that we are getting in the media or on WhatsApp groups to be the truth. And if we can just step out actually from our homes rather than just stay in our homes, even if we can do it in our mind, to stay out, move out of our home and to think about people who don't have homes or who are not safe in their homes. Yeah, we will be doing a lot for our society. So thank you. I'll end with that, and I'm happy to take question answers. Let me stop sharing. Thank you.
A big thank you to Dr. Geeta for such a brilliant eye-opening session. First, let us move to question answers. Dr. Aarti.
I can see some of the questions here that Aarti has put for me. Can I start reading those? There's a question by Alpha Pal. Women are last to hire, first to fire. With this epidemic, be an added woes to it. What is your take, ma'am? Yes, of course. There's no question, and Vibhuti-Ben is right here, and I'm sure she'll agree with me that in fact we are seeing this phenomenon globally, that where lockdowns are being taken back, it's absolutely clear that women find it harder to get their jobs back than the men. So the post-COVID trauma of gaining livelihood back for women is going to be much, much more challenging than for the men, and particularly in the the informal sector, particularly in private organizations. Yeah, and I'm wondering whether Vibhuti-Ben would like to add to that. Would you like to? Maybe you can unmute yourself.
So I think when the 92% of the workforce is in the informal sector, the law of jungle prevails, and so many state governments have asked that no labor law should be applied. No, it is in this context that women will suffer the most, because as it is, work participation has gone drastically down from 34% in 2013 to around 21% now, and that will go even further. It will be affected. So that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a related question by Dr. Kishore Bhanushali, and he's saying that pandemic is putting pressure on families for double income due to various reasons. This may result into more women entering into the labor force. Yes. I mean, especially you will see this in the small retail businesses. You will see that in families, small business families, who otherwise believed in not letting their women go out to work, might be forced to actually push the women out into, that is if they are not working. Large number of women actually do work. Yeah, but I would like to actually ask this question, Dr. Bhanushali, in a different way, as to what happens to women's labor at home. Yeah, we seem to only think about women's labor as something when they go out. Yeah, today's pandemic situation is making us ask this question once again, which we in women's groups have been asking for a very long time, that you have to economically value women's household labor. Yeah, and when men do this household labor in the house, it should not just be helping the women, but it should actually be taken and seen as their own responsibility. Yeah. Then there is another question. Just give me a minute. I'll look for it, which Aarti has sent to me. Again, same one it is. Yeah, it's the same one. Do you think that this pandemic has helped us in realizing the importance of social setup? Again, Dr. Kishore Bhanushali, I don't quite understand what you mean. Okay, realizing the importance of social setup. So if you mean social setup, the need for sociality, the need to depend, interdependence, the fact that we are deeply interdependent on each other, that modernity has made us understand that we are individuals, we are autonomous. Yes, that's very, very important. But also the pandemic is making us recognize that we are socially interdependent in every way. Okay, emotionally, intellectually, at the level of work. Yeah. So if that is what you mean, that yes, of course, the pandemic makes us realize the precarity of our lives and the importance of sociality. Yeah. There is a question by Dr. MM. what are the emerging research areas in gender and development in this given context? You have a better person there who's already spoken to you about it, Dr. Vibhuti-Ben Patel, on what are we doing. There is a lot the National Commission for Women are doing. There are a lot of that in other NGOs are doing on talking about, as I said, women as necessarily have to be the end in themselves of development programs, but also which women we are talking about, yeah, end in themselves of development programs, and also where their labor work, their care work begins to be recognized as important. Yeah, of course, there are lots of organizations and helplines that have been set up on looking at violence, gender and violence. What are the ways for the academia to take up relevant research and objectively build up bridges to unpack the making of the other? Huge numbers, no? I think as academics, it's our responsibility actually to generate research, to indicate in today's day and context, particularly how much we need to depend on each other rather than how much we need to make other, exclude people out of plans. Yeah. So I think if there is a lot that we need to do to look at it. What are the emerging research areas? Same thing. Same thing. Yeah. So I think whatever the questions are that I have been sent here by Aarti, I think I seem to have addressed them. But I definitely like to say that as academics, we have to really
Thank you. It was very good.
We seem to be getting caught, and we need to do that. There's no question about it. We seem to be getting caught in how should we do online, how should we get ourselves capable, how should we equip yourself, when are we starting online classes, when are we starting online exams. There's a lot of pressure to do that. Yeah, and with the burden of what are we going to do with our household and the work that is there. But I think at this point in time, it's very important for us to understand our role as academics, as social scientists. It's very important to allow, as Anuradha was also saying in the morning, allow your students the space and the time to heal, to process what is going on before we ask them to start becoming productive. Yeah. So I think as academics, if we can persuade the communities and the worlds around us that we need to reflect, we need to process before the pressure of productivity just overtakes us, and the best values of our profession, which is to make sensitive human beings, which is to make intelligent human beings. Yeah. If we'll forget that task if we are not careful. Okay. Because I know I work in science studies, and I know that what technology can do, it can just overtake. Yeah. And digital technologies have already overtaken, and now they will just, with artificial intelligence coming in. So we have to preserve and conserve our humanity, and whatever that means to all of us. Yeah. So I think as academics, we have a tremendous role to play in coming out of and making the post-COVID world. Yeah. Unfortunately, in the pandemic times, we've been arguing, saying social scientists are not taking, it's become as if it's the turf of the natural scientists. Yeah, because their epidemiologists are going to tell us how to fight the virus. And they're going to tell us how to do social distancing. But the social scientists are telling us something different, that what has happened in Sweden, don't we need to take on board the fact that social distancing was not done there. Lockdowns were not done. Social distancing, I won't say. Lockdowns were not done there. Did, for example, it lead to success? Did they develop herd immunity? All these are also questions that the social scientists should get engaged and involved in. Dr. Madhumita has asked a very sweet question. Social media has created a hype about developing family relations during the period. What is your opinion regarding this? Well, it's very hard to say, Dr. Madhumita. Family relationships of the middle class have been coming up with, food. I make good food every day. I make for the family. This is time to recover. This is time to heal. And it is a manufactured image. It's a manufactured discourse. Yeah. Early on, we also found this whole thing about nature is healing, etc., etc. People are healing. They have time to stay at home. Now they can bond better with each other. I'm sorry, the ground reality is not showing that. Yeah. People are collapsing. Okay. Under the kind of weighty family structures that we live in, the ageist family, the homophobic family, the patriarchal family, yeah, is not reinventing itself. Yeah, it is reproducing the powers of structures which are actually quite painful and traumatic for many people. So maybe I'm happy if a small section of the people are able to bond with each other, families, spend more time, the corporate people and all that, maybe. But that I would definitely not think is the overarching image about family in COVID times. Okay. And I'm sure a lot of you will probably agree with me on that. I don't know, especially the women, because men, how much ever hard they're trying, they still have patriarchy to fall back on and say, you do your webinar and you do everything, but you do it after you finish cooking for all of us and also washing and cleaning. So it's not easy.
That's very, very true, ma'am. Very true.
Absolutely.
Pandemic, yeah, Dr. MM is saying pandemic, great partners with patriarchy. Yeah, pandemic is not gender neutral. It is not caste neutral. It is helping patriarchy in many, many ways. In fact, as Shobha had said, why don't you do a session on gender? And I said, no, we are doing a lot on gender through the WBC. But yes, you're absolutely right that it is unfortunately feeding into gender stereotypical rules in families. Yeah. I can't see any other question.
Thank you, ma'am. This was the last question for you. Thank you. Very well explained.
Is there anything in the chat? No, nothing.
Thank you, ma'am. Very well explained. Over to Shobha, madam.
I think Madhuri ma'am comes in.
Okay, over to Madhuri Vaidya, ma'am.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mute myself.
Dr. Geeta, a fantastic session, really an eye-opener, particularly the 5 lenses that you talked about, the axis, right from class, caste and gender and tribe and religious minority. Though there are a number of issues which you talked about that who are the maximally affected people, but again from religious minority point of view, who are the people who have been so pro-social and truly working for others in spite of one's own difficulties and all. And overall, yes, though it is a moral challenge to cope with this pandemic, I believe that, yes, let's move towards building a solidarity on a group level. And as an academician, as in the end, you talked about that it is our moral responsibility to do so. I believe that to an extent, our conference has become successful in provoking thoughts in so many minds that let us think about from economic, from psychological, from sociological, and from medical historian point of view, think about this COVID-19 and how we can come out of it and lead a happy and healthy life post-COVID. I hand it over to Shobha for further formalities. And thank you, Geeta, once again. Thank you, Dr. Somni.
Pleasure. Requesting that you share a recording so all our students will be able to benefit, if possible.
Sure.
We will try that, definitely.
Yes, sure.
I, of course, have also made the request that since this has been largely an academic exercise, I personally think, I don't know what Anuradha would say, that I would not like it to be kept on YouTube, permanently. So that's my request.
Yes, ma'am. I was just about to mention that.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. Thank you, Madhuri. Over the past 3 days, we have deliberated over several dimensions and perspectives of the current COVID pandemic. The eminent resource persons Dr. Mridula Ramanna, Dr. Judy Andrews Grace, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, Dr. Jaisani, Dr. Anuradha Sony, and lastly but not the least, Dr. Geeta Chedda have shared their expertise and wisdom in an engrossing and inspiring manner. I would like to express my gratitude to each one of them for sharing their valuable time and efforts in such a lucid and accessible manner. This conference would not have been possible without the faith of our trustees and management in the organizing team. Their unstinting support in all our endeavors is constant. Special thanks are due to Dr. Kumdavalli, Director, SPRJ and Kanyashala Trust, for a timely guidance and encouragement. I would like to thank our dynamic principal, Dr. Asha Menon, for her go-getter attitude, which helped us to organize this national virtual webinar. She was involved in every step, right from the visualization to the implementation. I would like to express my gratitude also to MUKTA and the technical team for their dedicated support and helping us to organize the 3-day National Virtual Conference. The IQAC team members of Srimati P. N. Doshi Women's College truly deserve loads of appreciation for all their efforts behind the scenes. A big thank you to Sucheta Bhuvar and Hashmat for all the help given for publicity and feedback forms. I would like to specially mention here Swati Suchak for her patience and untiring efforts to prepare the brochure for this conference. Last but not the least, I would like to say a big thank you to all the attendees for registering and attending in huge numbers to make this conference a success. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we will stop live streaming first.
Before we stop, tomorrow we have another webinar. All those who have on learning difficulties and identifying different learners. So do join us for that webinar. More than 700 people have already registered, but still who are interested can do so. So let's look forward to tomorrow's webinar.
Should we stop live streaming?
Yes.